concept known as Occam's razor. It was developed by Sir William Ockham back in the 14th century. Sir William discovered that the best solution to most problems is usually the simplest one. You know, we've tried to overcomplicate a whole lot of things in education, and I'm so thrilled to be speaking today because I love the theme of this conference. Let it be me. Every single one of you has the ability to have a huge impact on society. And the people that I love to inspire are the people often forgotten and how they can have an impact, and that's our children. Now, reading is my passion, but it always wasn't my passion. When I was a kid, my mom and I used to read a book before I went to bed that started out Once Upon a Time. Fairly straightforward, except I didn't see the O, because the O was really big, it was made out of gold, it was in a box and had all these vines around it. And so Mom said, okay, Danny, read with me. I said, once upon a time. And she said, no, Danny, that word says once. Try it again. Once upon a time. I said, no, Danny, that word says once. Say it once, twice. I'm like, once. Like, again. Once upon a time. Like, you're not learning anything. They're going to put you in special ed. She always got me trying before I went to sleep. One day, a buddy of mine came to my house. We were playing, and I took out this book. I guess I wanted to impress him with my reading ability. And I go, once upon a time. He's like, hey, nincompoop, you see that big O in the box? It's made out of gold with all the vines around. That's an O. That says once, silly. Once upon a time. I'll tell you why I always share that story with teachers and with parents. Sometimes we try 38 strategies with a kid, and we're ignoring the single greatest resource at our disposal. Other kids. Kids and adults think differently. I've known this ever since I was a kid. When I was in kindergarten, Sister Rosanna asked us one day if we all wanted to go to heaven. And all of us raised our hands except for Hector. And she's like, you don't want to go to heaven, Hector? He's like, oh, I thought you were talking about today. He's right. He's just looking at her question from a totally different point of view. And so that's what I'm going to challenge us to do today, is to look at the world from a different point of view. I want us to figure out what is reading, why don't people read, and how do we get people to read? So we'll start off with the first question. What is reading? Well, learning to read is like learning to ride a bike. It becomes easier with experience, and we know experience leads to confidence. Well, that sounds simple enough. Please remember this. People who say that's easy should be severely beaten. Anything is easy once you know how to do it. It's the getting to know how to do it that's the trick. So people always ask me, Danny, well, why don't people read? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First of all, there's a condition known as illiteracy, which means people can't read. There's also a condition known as alliteracy, which means people won't read. Both are paralyzing, but I'm going to argue today that I don't really believe there is such a thing as illiteracy. There's just different degrees of literacy. For example, if you see a red light, what's that mean? Good. A lot of people in Southern California fail to recognize that. If you see a blue sign in a parking lot with a white person in a wheelchair, what's that mean? That means good parking spots. My own children, we have over 300 DVDs in our home, but they knew exactly which one was Finding Nemo. It didn't matter where I put it, they could locate it. Children from the time they are in the womb can identify what the golden arches mean. Stop the car! You know, so why aren't people reading? Well, I got three ideas about that. First of all, today's illiteracy rate is alarming. Kids are choosing not to read. I always have somebody in the audience who's like, I don't understand why kids don't like to read. I liked to read when I was a kid. Yeah, when you were a kid, fire had just been discovered. I mean, look at all the stuff competing for kids' attention nowadays. I mean, you got TV shows and movies where the cuts are so rapid. No wonder kids have attention deficit disorder. You got the internet where a kid can open up 30 windows at a time. You got video games where some of the characters in the video games look more lifelike than some of the celebrities I saw on the red carpet at the Academy Awards last year. The second problem I see is a thing I call the reading wars. I've been in higher education for a long time, and they're still debating on how you teach kids how to read. And you got the people over here that believe the way you teach a kid how to read is alligator, ball, cat, because that's the way we all speak, right? And then you got the people over here who believe the way you teach a kid how to read. Okay, Bobby, I want you to take this book home, put it under your pillow, and when you wake up, you'll know how to read. And I'm being facetious because we know if you want to learn how to read, knowing some of the sounds, the blends, is helpful, isn't it? It certainly is. And if you want to learn how to read, having opportunities to read for fun is helpful, isn't it? It certainly is. But we know we have to use a balanced approach with kids, but this is what I've learned with kids. If I got a kid that loves sitting there doing phonics worksheets all day, what should I do? Give them phonics worksheets. If I got a kid that loves sitting in the corner reading on her own, what should I do? Let her. The school was built for them, not for me. You know? We need to design our schools around our children, not around our thoughts as adults. The third problem I've seen, why is it Time magazine always gives Person of the Year to a president or to a terrorist? How about giving it to one of these two women, like this woman, TGFO. Thank goodness for Oprah. You need to know something about me. I'm a highly spiritual person. Every single night I say a simple prayer to God. I say, Dear Lord, please let Oprah read one of my books and just talk about it on her show. Because what happens when Oprah just talks about a book? Instant bestseller. She talks about a 75-year-old book called Of Mice and Men. It sells 1 million copies within a month. And I don't believe I've ever seen Oprah on her show say, oh, I just read this great book. It's called Their Eyes Were Watching God. Here's what I'd like you to do at home. I want you to get out a piece of paper and a pen. I want you to write down the copyright date, the 3 main characters, the theme. Please remember these 3 words. Book reports stink. They get kids to hate reading. Oprah gets people excited about reading. She talks about books the way people talk about their favorite TV shows and their favorite sports teams. She gets people excited about reading. The more excited you are to read, the more likely you are to read. The more you read, the better you get. It doesn't matter. The research says this. It doesn't matter what you read. It matters how much you read. It doesn't matter if you're reading James Joyce or James and the Giant Peach. People who read more read better. I'm on an airplane at least once a week, and I cannot remember the last time I sat next to somebody who was enjoying Dostoevsky or Moliere or Maya Angelou. But I sit next to plenty of people reading People magazine, USA Today, and 50 Shades of Grey. Perverts. Here's another woman I greatly admire, the welfare mom, Joanne K. Rowling, who 20 years ago was stuck waiting for a train, and during that 4-hour layover, she envisioned an entire series of books about a little boy wizard by the name of Harry Potter, which for the last 20 years has been the most banned book in American public schools, and thank goodness. Because there is no way we should allow young children to stand outside a bookstore at midnight waiting to buy a 900-page book. They want to read in 2 days. I like to remind my friends that have the problem with Harry Potter, without Harry Potter, you don't get the renewed interest in the Chronicles of Narnia. Kids have this amazing thing between their ears. Let them use it from time to time. We shouldn't censor any books from kids. Matter of fact, there's one book that should be in every public school they took out years ago. We need to get people reading for fun again. Would you like to know the secret to a long life?
Yes.
Turn off the TV news. Sorry, dude. And read a funny children's book. I can already tell you what's on the news tonight. The world is coming to an end, and whoever the president is doing a bad job. It's been the same negative news for the last 100 years. Read a funny children's book. You'll impress your friends. Yeah, I read a book cover to cover last night. Really? What was it about? It's about this little red hen. So how do we get people to read? I've been blessed with wonderful teachers, mentors in my life. The first one was a professor of mine at the University of Southern California by the name of Stephen Krashman. Krashman wrote a great book called The Power of Reading. And I'd like to ask you all a riddle right now. Hopefully you can think about this. Can you tell me, what was your favorite textbook as a child? Thank you for laughing. Some places they try and answer this question. It drives me nuts, the emphasis we put on textbooks in this country. For the price of a brand new textbook, I could buy 15 real books that would actually get a kid excited about reading. I once had a principal, his name was Mr. Reaper, Grim Reaper, and he used to ask me if I was using my textbook, and I can honestly say yes, because they make great doorstops. but they're not a great way to get kids excited about reading. I can't tell you how many 7th grade boys I've worked with. There is no way he's reading this textbook. But if I give him a copy of a manual on how to fix a Chevy, he'll memorize it from cover to cover, because he's interested in it. Krashen's done tons of studies on this, and he finds that it's your interest that drives reading. Here's the other thing I always emphasize to school teachers. Give kids time to read in class. This is my Sally Strutter speech. 10 minutes a day. The time it takes to drink a cup of coffee, you can significantly improve the reading abilities of your students if you give them some time to read in class. Why do I emphasize this to teachers? In all my years of teaching, I've learned one thing. No matter what I do, I cannot control my students' home environment, but I can't control my classroom environment. There's not a single pre-K-12 teacher in America who can't find at least 10 minutes a day to get that kid to love reading. Another mentor of mine was a guy by the name of Jim Trelease. He wrote a wonderful book called The Read Aloud Handbook. He doesn't need me pushing it. It's one of the best-selling books of all time in education. Jim says, if reading aloud cost $129, every parent would rush out and buy it. And if we found out that kids hated it, they would mandate it in the schools tomorrow. It's so simple and yet so powerful. I've asked people, thousands of people, how did you learn how to read? I've never had a single person say, oh, the way I learned how to read is my grandma. And she had this rocking chair. And she'd sit in that rocking chair and she'd sit me on her lap and we'd rock back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. She held that book open and she'd smile into my eyes and point at the words and go, alligator, Never heard anybody say that's how they learn how to read. But I've heard plenty of people say, oh, you know what, my mom used to read to me before we went to bed. Dad would read to us while we were waiting at doctor's offices. I had this uncle who always read funny stories to us. Now, have any of you ever heard of a guy named Will Hobbs? Will Hobbs is one of the best-selling young adult authors in America. He writes a lot of books that are especially popular with teenage boys. Before he became a best-selling young adult author, he was my 7th grade reading teacher in Durango, Colorado. And Will was the guy that got me interested in reading for the first time. He had 5,000 books in his classroom, and every day at the beginning of class, he would tell us what he was reading, we would tell him what we were reading, and the rest of the 15-minute period, we read. Whenever we finished a book, we'd take it up to Mr. Hobbs, he'd put down the book he was reading, look through our book, ask us 3 or 4 questions. If he was satisfied with our answers, he gave us a point. Every book up to 200 pages was worth 1 point. Every extra 100 pages was worth another point. You needed 25 points to get an A, and the top 5 point totals had their names written on the board. And I wanted my name written on that board. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne, 500-page book. 4 points. Also an excellent Disney film starring James Mason and Kirk Douglas. I didn't really feel like reading a 500-page book, so I took the book out to Mr. Hobbs. He asked me 4 questions, and I learned a valuable lesson that day. Books ain't always like the movies. And guess what Mr. Hobbs did? He gave me the 4 points, and that's when I learned a great teaching trick. Guilt works. Because I read every word of every page of every book from that point forward. Wound up with 44 points, went well above and beyond what I had to do. He used the single greatest strategy I've ever seen a teacher use to get a kid excited about reading. May I share it with you? Yes. He found out what I was interested in, which was football. And at least once a week, he'd come up to me with a book. He's like, hey, Danny, check out this book on John Elway. I know you'll like it. What are the odds I open up that book? In my experience with all ages, 100%. Kid might not read it, but they're going to open it. Also, in my experience, by the 4th time I do that with a kid, they're going to try and read that book. Because there's nothing more powerful than somebody important in your life, a teacher, a coach, a pastor, a parent, an older sibling, saying, you know what, I was thinking of you. Why don't you check this out? So simple and yet so powerful. We try to overcomplicate things in our schools every single day. Now, probably the most important mentors I've had for reading have been my mother and my father. They're kind of an odd couple. My father's like Rain Man, my mother's an actress. Growing up, my father would always be sitting in his recliner with his glass of scotch beside him, with a book in his hands, listening to his opera, while my mother, my brother, my sister, and I were talking and the television set was turned on. And now that I'm a parent, I really appreciate that glass of scotch, which was constantly beside me. My mother never stops talking. Who do you think I took after? People think I talk a lot. I actually never had a chance growing up. My mother's never received a piece of mail that she did not feel compelled to read aloud to every single person. Hey, Danny, you remember Mrs. Hufnagel? She died 4 years before you were born. I just got a letter from her daughter. Let me read it to you. I have no interest in this whatsoever. She'd read aloud newspaper articles she found interesting. Hey, Danny, you see the Lakers won last night? Yeah, Mom, I read the article. Kobe scored 43 points. Did you read that? Mom, I read the article. Powell had 12 points. Did you read that? Mom, I read the article. She gets more and more excited reading to me something I've already read. People used to always ask my mom why she didn't have a dishwasher, and she'd say, oh, I got 3, Danny, Jim, and Liz. Now, while we were washing and drying dishes, she was reading to us. She taught me something very valuable. You don't need a PhD to be a really good parent. You just have to be there. You have to take an interest in your child. Good parents are our best teachers. You know, it was Charlie Tremendous Jones who once said, you are the same today as you will be in 5 years, except for 2 things: the people you meet and the books you read. It's our job to surround ourselves with people that are going to empower us, with books that are going to challenge us. And I promise you, if we can do this with our students, we are going to have a revolution where kids stop reading to do well in a test and start reading because they want to do well in life. There's a great Spanish proverb I love. It says, how beautiful to do nothing and then rest afterward. You know, there's nothing more beautiful to me than sitting with my children on a lazy afternoon behind a really good book. I thank you for your attention, and I want to challenge you with one last comment I used to always make to my students. Education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Thank you.